Welcome to the Tuesday AI Pulse. I'm Chuck Boyce with CB Creative, and this is session 2 of 5. And it's a new track I created that talks more about the who, what, why, and where of AI in a business rather than track A. When I do those tend to be application oriented, new tools that you should be aware of. Track B is more business impact, and this new C track is more about how things fit into a business more effectively. And so um, let's go on to the next page. And so a lot of times I hear that, oh, you're just anti-AI because I bring up all these questions about how secure is it, what is it doing? And so a lot of times people think that I'm anti-AI, but I'm anti-wrong AI or anti-implementing it wrong. And so as I said, this is part 2 of 5. And last session, we built some filters. There were 4 conditions that allow you to evaluate how a tool fits into your business. And so before you evaluate any use cases, you run through the 4 questions, and after they bought the tool. So if you could do this before, that's better. And so we'll do the applied version of that. I'm going to walk through 5 use cases that hold up for small businesses. And we're going to apply the filter out loud for each one so you can see the reasoning and not just a conclusion. And we're going to look back at some use cases that look familiar but don't hold up because that's where expensive mistakes could happen. And they're not obvious failures, but they feel close. And so I want to be direct before we start. I'm not going to tell you AI is transformative and you need to move fast. I'm also not going to tell you to avoid it. I'm going to show you where it works at your scale and why. And I'm going to walk out with 2 or 3 use cases you can be confident about. And again, I focus for smaller businesses, the 1 to 30 type business that tends to be using AI right now, mostly a chat GPT, Claude, creating content, writing emails, recording calls, things like that. And so they're not really impacting their business that heavily. They're not running AI to make things change in their business. They're just using it to supplement or augment their business. So the 5 use cases I'm going to use today is number 1 is drafting content with human edits. These are your proposals, emails, internal documentation that AI can draft it and then a human can look at it and review it and then send it out. Next one is the document summarization, which is really great because you can take meeting notes or PDFs or policies or things like that. Like when I was talking earlier, looking at a terms of service or a terms of conditions for an app and having AI analyze it so you don't have to run through 25 pages of stuff and you can get a good review focusing on what you are interested in knowing and you don't have to go through the entire document. So document summarization is great. Data formatting and cleanup, that's another great use for it. You can take a spreadsheet, dump your customer information in or something like that, and you can find out if people are entering data wrong, entering invoice numbers wrong, or entering names of cities or street names or something like that in an inconsistent format. If you need them to be consistent, you can then go in and clean them easily because you can dump it into a spreadsheet, sort it, normalize it, deduplicate, and then bring it back up. And so it's a great way to use that to clean up data. Communication templates are another great one. It's repeatable structure. You get human review, but the AI has a template to start with. And then note taking, which you'll see all the time. Note taking is really great for providing transcripts, but you do have to understand state consent laws and disable it when requested. And so that's why I turn off note takers on this meeting, is because if people are there and they don't give consent, I'm not allowing them. And so that's something that I'll cover a little bit later. So use case number 1, this is probably the most widely adopted one. Most people use it right now. Writing proposals, writing follow-up emails, creating internal documentation. And so if we run it through the filter, first of all, what holds up? Is the task defined? You know what done looks like. And so, yes, the task is defined. You know what a proposal looks like. You know what a follow-up email needs to do. So there's a clear definition of what's done. So that's filter one. Errors, are they catchable before they cause damage? Yes. If a human is actually reading before sending, it's conditional, and so that one holds up. Does a human own the final version? Yes, by design, because you're asking it to draft and you're approving the final output, and then you are sending it. So yes, a human does own it, so 3 is met. And then, is the data risk low? It can be. If you're drafting a generic follow-up template, the risk is minimal. If you're feeding client contract information into a public model, then you start to get potential problems. That's a different calculation. As long as there's not any proprietary or confidential information that's being sent up to an AI to process it, then it holds up. If you're using a local AI on your machine in your business that's firewalled, then you can deal with confidential information. But if you're using public stuff, which most people are doing, then you don't want to have any proprietary or confidential information. Read privacy policies before you do that. Find out where the data is going, where it's being used, how it's being stored, things like that. So in general, if it's not contract or proprietary or confidential, you can use this. So here's where it can go wrong. And it's when a human reviews it in 3 seconds instead of, or if they review it and then they say, yeah, that looks really great, it's done. But that's not a review. That's just a rubber stamp. And you're saying, yep, yeah, I did a good job, boom. And it could be, but you really do have to follow through, because the moment it becomes just like, yeah, it's been consistent all the time, and now you're just doing the 3-second review, let's do that, it's not really a review. And so, again, the reviews are only good as the person reviewing it and understanding what really needs to go out. Now, if you're doing this for a first draft content, again, this is a good use case, but you do have to be careful in certain situations and not just rubber stamping it, which people are going to do, but you should try to avoid it. Next is the internal summarization, which is meeting notes, policy documents, long emails, terms of service, things like that. The source material is yours and the output stays within your building, and so you are using it, you're not sending it out to a client. The source material is controlled, you have internal documentation, and so the first filter, is the task defined? Yes, you want to find errors. You want to, you know you have this document and you want to get results. So yes, it is a defined task. And then catchable errors, if you have the source material there, you can validate the source versus what AI gave you. So the source errors are catchable. The human owns the output. Yes, human is entering what they want summarized, and then they're reviewing the results. So the human input is there. And then the data risk depends on what's in the document and where it's being processed. So again, if there's no confidentiality, there's no proprietary information, and you don't worry about there's no regulations that you have to follow, that will work. So this will hold up cleanly if you have internal material and the output stays internal. So as long as it's all within yourself, you're in good shape. So where it breaks down again is when you start forwarding the summary without the original, or if you just rely on the summary and you don't do a total review. If a decision gets made on the summary and no one checks the model or no one checks it back against the original source, that's where you start to get into the gray areas again. And so a summary is a starting point. It's not an authoritative record. It matters really more than it sounds. And so it performs a decision. It doesn't replace judgment. It's just a distinction. So summarization, great use case as long as it stays internal. Data formatting is the other one. Reformatting spreadsheets, as long as you're reformatting numbers and not formulas. When you have to start reformatting, if formulas are involved, then you have to have somebody who understands the formula to know what the formula is supposed to do. And so if it's just data, if it's just a CSV in a table, then it's a great use. You can flag duplicates, you can clean it out, and it's very repetitive. It's different than, yeah, again, if you're just thinking about highly repetitive, if people are entering data and they may be entering it slower, they may be having typos and things like that, this is where it can be something that can be cleaned up. And so filtering it, it is a defined task. It is a repetitive task that's being done all the time. So yes, task is there. Can errors be caught? Yes, because you are comparing it to the original input and the output, so you can verify what changes. The ownership is there because you are actually following up on, you know what the input looks like, you know what the output looks like, and comparing if it did it correctly. And then the data risk is low because it's internal operational data. And so, again, all four filters work. The damage ceiling is if something goes wrong is low, and then you can run the process, spot check it, catch the problems before they compound. And so again, it's staying internal, it's not impacting clients, it's not going out into the internet. And so the time savings are really there. You can really compare this against the manual process to the cleaned up process, and you can get an ROI because you can say, this did save me X amount of hours and I'm paying this person X amount of dollars. And so you can get an actual cost on this. Customer templates, they're not autonomous replies. These are templates that have variables in them, and you may have a form that somebody fills out, and then the data that they filled into the form are populated into this template to get a result. And so that's a big difference. This is structured variables that human fills in. So the form has the variables, it's populating the template, you are still reviewing it. And so the task is defined, you can catch the errors, a human is reviewing it with ownership, and the data risk is low because you have a template, it's generic, it's not doing anything proprietary, there's no sensitive customer data, it's just populating variables with known entities. The structure holds up because the human is in the loop by default. You can't send a message without the human touching it. And so that's all by design. And so if you automate the send and you remove the review, this case fails because now you have an autonomous customer-facing output with different category and carries different risks, and it has reputational possibilities. So again, a template filled in with variables that are from a form or something like that, and a human is reviewing it, it's okay. It's when you automate it and there's no human oversight that you run into potential problems. Note taking is an interesting one because it's really common. I don't know how many meetings you've gone through that Otter joins or Firefly joins or Reed joins or something like that. I use Granola myself. It's a Mac app, and it is a transcriber that runs locally on the machine. It doesn't send anything up into the internet. And so the reason that makes a difference is that, first of all, if it's just doing transcriptions and summarization, you have a defined task, you can catch the errors, there's a human in the loop, and the data risk tends to be low. Now there's two things. First, who's in the meeting and do they know it's being recorded and transcribed? There are what's called single consent states and multi-consent states. And so if you are in one state, I'm in South Carolina, it's a single consent state. I can run this, I'm consenting that it's being transcribed and recorded. But if someone's in California or Florida or another state that has a multi-consent or dual consent law, you have to inform the other person that it is being recorded and transcribed, and you can request that they turn that off. And so that is a consumer protection law from that state. And it's not where you are based, it's where the client is based. And so disclose before you record. Second, where does the transcript go? A lot of these otters and fireflies and stuff, if you don't read their policies, their privacy policies, it could send them up. They can retain it, they can store it, they can possibly use it to train their models. And so, again, know where that data is going. How sensitive is it? Are there rules that or client contact information? Is it proprietary? If there's certain things like that, make sure that it is staying private. It is following your privacy laws, your client sensitivity laws, or contract information, things like that. And so, again, depending on the type of information that's being recorded or stored, you have to be aware of the potential regulatory compliance issues around that. And so, again, I use a locally stored transcript. It doesn't record voices, it doesn't record who's in the meeting unless they say their name. So it's just tracking the conversation like a note taker. But if it's an AI note taker that's cloud based, you have to be concerned about where it's being stored. So, the 5 things that they should have in common is they pass the filter, and there's a built-in review step, and so then there's a human in the loop, and there's a measurable output. And so all 5 of those pass the 4 conditions. All 5 have a review step. They don't require discipline to remember it. It's built into how the workflow works. None of them are autonomous. They're not being automated to the point that a human is not in the loop. There is a human making a decision. You can measure the output of all of them, and you can compare the AI draft to a human edited version. You can verify a summary against the source. You can check the data against the original. So everyone is measurable. Everyone is human reviewable, and that's why it works. And so the use cases on this list are ones that generate a lot of excitement, and they do have measurable impact on improving how quickly things can be done in a business. So they're really true time savers. And what the vendor demos won't show you is a lot of the stuff that happens. So if they start getting more complex and the demos look really great, they work consistently, it's because it's been done in a controlled test environment. And so you need to also start in a controlled test environment before doing anything that touches production data. And so these are all pretty much internal steps with a human before it goes out to the client. Now here's where things look similar, but they don't hold up. And the first one, these can become very risky. And so they're similar. Number one is the autonomous customer-facing responses without a review. And so if you just decide that the task looks really great and it's been consistent, we can now just send this to a customer without a human in the loop, that could be wrong. It's you could get a frustrated customer. You could get something that doesn't hold up. One factually incorrect answer that you didn't catch. You don't know if you're not managing it. And so if it could be regulatory, it could be reputational, it could be financial. It has an impact if you're just doing this automatically. There are times that autonomous can work, but not 100% of the time, depending on the rules and how much you want to pay for that. And so another one is AI generated advice being presented as authoritative. That one is an interesting one because AI is the way that large language models work, the LLMs, is that they're there to sound confident, and they're there to make sure that they're sycophants. They're like, yeah, that's a great job. You did great. And if you are really knowledgeable about the topic, you can spot where hallucinations are. But if you're in an area that it's you're not familiar, you're looking for recommendations, then you need to go a little bit deeper. And so, diagnosing, getting financial guidance, things like that. It could be authoritative, but if you're not a professional in that industry, you're not 100% sure that that is actually really true advice. And so, it's not an exposure problem, it's not a productivity win. It could be a potential breach of trust. Client data being fed into the public model. This is the shadow AI. Um, this is where a client or a person, a salesperson or something like that in your company, they decide they want to save time. They're at home at night and they want to write a proposal really quick. So they use a public version of ChatGPT or Claude, and they write a proposal, they dump some client information in there, and then they write the proposal, they send it out, not realizing that that client proposal information is now sent up to OpenAI or Anthropic, and it's in the public view. They could be using it, be training their models. If a user hasn't gone through all the looking at how to make sure your app is private and they're just using it generically, that could be a hole. And that's what shadow AI is. It's using AI outside of your organization that you may not be aware of. And that is a very big problem. It's a common problem. And so you have to understand, you need privacy policy understandings. You need to have a policy that your staff understands as where, how, what tools can be used and what data can be put into it. Very simple policies, but they have to be made aware of them. And then the other one is the undocumented processes. If you're trying to automate something that doesn't exist on paper, you saw a new tool and it sounds really great for your business, but if you don't have a documented step-by-step process that you want to automate, and you're just making it on the fly, it may look good, but if you're trying to automate it, if you're not consistent, you could have bad data going in, you could be missing a step, you could be doing something that you didn't expect to happen. So this is the part nobody wants to do, is documenting, and this is where it's really important, is trying to think about things like edge cases. How many edge cases? What happens with the frustrated client or the one-off proposal? If an undocumented refund, various things. There's all sorts of edge cases that don't hold up in these. And if you try to run it through an automated process without that human review and you get that weird edge case, it could cause problems. And so clean, standard operating procedures aren't bureaucratic. They are bureaucratic, but it's a necessity. It's not an exercise. They're a prerequisite for any AI use case. You have to document what you know and have a point person that can own that documentation. And it's a gap that you should fill before you start bringing this into a scaled production environment. And you learn that through test cases and sandbox environments. You never implement this directly into a production environment. Hidden costs. The use cases can pass all 4 filters, but then it can still cost a lot of money, because what, again, most people don't see is the real cost of AI. They look at the subscription and it looks really inexpensive. You're running a few hundred queries, you may pay a few $100s or a few dollars. And so the more you use it, the more your possible token usage gets there. And so if you're using an automation that does an API call and it works great with 5 times being run, and you understand that, oh great, 5 times it's running me, it's 37 cents to run this process, and that is something that you're saying, okay, that's not too bad. But then if it's scaled up into hundreds or more, then your cost suddenly is astronomically larger than what you originally may have budgeted for. And so as you're usage goes up, so do your API costs and your token cost, and that's outside of your subscription cost. And so depending on how you use your LLMs, there could be additional pricing and model pricing as early as 2026 right now. You have to look at where it is now. Recently, up until now, a lot of the cost has been subsidized. It's been artificially low because people want to get you hooked on it. They want you to build processes. They want you to bring AI embedded into your systems before you understand what the true cost is. Now that a lot of these costs, you see all these data centers being built and all the excess costs being charged on top of that, token cost and usage cost are going to be going up depending on the complexity of the model you're using. There's going to be different costs. Simple models are low cost. High thinking models are an additional cost. And so those are going to be increasing, whether you like it or not. It's just the reality. And then data storage and retention, there's another one. If you are using an automation, you create a new tool. Internally, you vibe code something and say this is great, but it uses something like Supabase or Firebase or something like that, a Mongo database in the back end. You suddenly now have database costs on top of that. And so where's the data being stored? How long is it being retained? Is there an excess cost for your database? And then where nobody really wants to talk about is the staff time. Staff time is a cost for this process. If you document your process manually right now, you know that it takes one person at $25 an hour, 3 hours to do, and we get this result. The tools cost X amount. You have a fixed cost to know how this is done manually. You have something to benchmark against. So then if you start saying, great, now we're adding this, we add these extra tool costs, it's saving us some potential upfront user cost, but how much extra cost may be there for review? How much time is there for training your staff on these new tools? How much time is it to roll back? What is the cost for finding problems? So again, people look at the subscription cost and think that it's inexpensive. But if you start adding all of these other hidden costs, it can be up to 10 times more than what you originally anticipated. And so you have to think about where these things are going to be stored, how long it's going to be stored, what are the costs of your human outside of saving time on, it took me 10 minutes to write this email, I can now do it in 30 seconds. Great. Is there a review time? How does it impact? There's all those other costs that people don't take into consideration. So use costs that hold up. They're not exciting, but they do go beyond what most people have done for just writing an email or creating an image or creating a website or something like that. It does allow you to add more. It gets you used to using AI. It has the human in the loop. You're doing a defined task. Somebody owns it. They're boring at first, but you're integrating AI. You're understanding what it does, how it impacts your business. So you start with simple use cases first. You pilot it. You prove it. Then you move on. Do you know the input? Do you know what the expected output is? Does that meet that? Great. We have one use case, one pilot. It works. Build on that. After that, the exciting ones then become easier to implement because you understand the risk and you have a track record and you have something to measure against. So, these are the readiness gaps. That's what's coming up next week is part 3 is going to be the readiness gaps and how to diagnose them. Talking about process documentation and data quality and staff readiness and things like that. And so that's going to be in session 3 coming up next week. And so if you have a specific use case that you want to evaluate, please, I can help you out with that. 15 minutes, no pitches. I don't pitch product. I talk about how to implement it with the least impact to your business, understand the costs and everything like that. And so I don't say, oh, you need to use chat or you need to use Claude or you need to use product X. I don't do any of that. I see what your process is, help you figure out the best tool for that. And so if you want, please set up a time with me on contact. And with that, that is all I had to cover for today.